So we've got all this amazing productivity, but wages and salaries as a percentage of the gross domestic product have gone since 1960 from over 50% to just over 40%. So we've been on this, as you can see from the chart, we've been on this steady decline. Nice, right? Yeah. Steady decline, and so in another 50 years, who knows where we're going to be as a percentage of gross domestic product. So in terms of what you can buy, in the long run, wages tend to remain constant as they have since Henry George wrote his book in 1879. And we've intervened with the minimum wage, the 8-hour day, the right of labor unions to organize and to collective bargaining. Employers have been forced to contribute to Social Security and Medicare, but the tendency remains. Now, I don't know if this is a good thing from the beginning for the first lesson, but we've just marked the 50th anniversary of the War on Poverty. In 1964, there were 39 million Americans living in poverty, and today there are 46 million Americans living in poverty. 7 million more Americans living in poverty than we did before. Now, the population has increased by a lot, and so it was 22% in 1964, and now it's 15%. But as a number, and if you're poor, do you care what percentage it is? And of course, the poverty has been ameliorated by food stamps, Medicaid, housing subsidies, and programs like the Earned Income Tax Credit. Everyone from the most skilled to the least skilled are producing with an accelerating efficiency. All workers are increasing productivity. At the end of 2007, that's before the recession started, 146 million people were working, and in 2010, 139 million people were working. 7 million people, 5% less of the population was working. So in 2013, 0.3% more of the population were working than in 2010. So there is the recession, the Great Recession. 63% of the workforce is employed, and now it's 58.5%, or moving up toward 59 by the year 2014. We had the same labor force with the same skills, the same natural resources, the same level of technology, the same buildings and machines, and the same money and credit system in 2008 as we had in 2007. Yet, 5% less of the population were working. So we get back to these basic questions. Why are the least productive workers always unemployed? Why don't wages increase with advancing technology? Why are there recurring periods of hyper-unemployment? And I said hyper-unemployment simply because, by definition, what is a recession?
It's a mild depression.
More. Oh yeah, true.
Two quarters of contracting GDP.
2 quarters in which it doesn't expand. A contraction, 10 months is what, not quite 3/4.
2 quarters. That's 6 months of
6
contracting
months,
GDP.
10 months. But according to the encyclopedia, 10 months in which the economy contracts is a depression, but 6 months in which it doesn't expand is a recession. So, but you could have, that has nothing to do with unemployment rates, necessarily. One is assumed. So that's why I've said hyper-unemployment. So nobody, I mean, right now they are claiming that the unemployment rate is only 5%.
5.9.
5.9. Let's just say 6%. Well, if you're the guy who is unemployed, it's hard to believe the recession is over and everything is fine. And so that's why I've just used hyper-unemployment instead of that. So we look at the production of wealth, labor applied to the natural resources. We combine them, we separate them, we change them in form or in place. First, we produce the capital wealth, the buildings, machines, inventories that we use to give our labor a greater efficiency in altering these natural resources. And we produce food, clothing, shelter, automobiles, television, which we store, transport, trade, and finally put in the hands of the ultimate consumer. So anything that aids in getting a natural resource to the consumer in the desired form is part of production. And it is complete when the product is in the hands of the ultimate consumer. Now, of course, we're talking economics, so of course money comes into it. Can you eat it?
No.
Can you wear it? Can you ride around in it? Can you live in it? What do you do with money? And I would always ask a woman this if you're in a class. Because so they don't say save it.
Exchange
You spend it. Yeah.
it. No, exchange it.
So of course it's a medium of exchange. The important thing, you'll see in a minute here, which one of these two cars is worth more? I mean, here's the nice one, but 4 back seat, 4 doors, a roof over it. This thing is bare bones, isn't it? No roof, 1 seat, for 2 people. And which one is worth more?
The Mercedes.
The Mercedes. Why would that be worth more?
Because it's
Engineering.
Skills.
And ultimately, would it cost more to produce another one? Absolutely, require more labor and
Quality.
capital to
Within
make
there.
it.
Leather seats, all that
So,
stuff.
then,
Material.
say, well, which one of these is worth more? Which one costs more to produce?
The same.
6 cents a piece, huh? So, would printing money be the same as making cars and building houses and growing food? Not at all. All right, so returning to the question, why are the least educated skilled always at the minimum wage? Do they not produce enough that they can be paid more? Why are the least productive people always unemployable? Can they not produce enough that they can be paid the minimum wage? Or are there simply not enough jobs? And to make my point, I go for lunch, McDonald's down at 28th Street. And I got to get back because I got a class, at 1 o'clock. And I see that something's not worked, the line isn't moving, and the manager's talking to the guy at the cash register. The cash register's broke, and it looks like we're never going to get out of here. And this kid says, "Oh, well, sir, I'm going to get a degree in accounting in June. I can make change and write the slips, no problem." Oh, great. But who's going to get you through the line faster? The high school dropout, or the guy with about to get an accounting degree, or the high school dropout with a cash register that works? Sure. You don't have to know how to make change. You don't have to be able to read, really. Just push the pictures and it tells you how much it adds it up for you, and so on. And look at the supermarket, the scanner, and all the tools that a carpenter uses that shoots nails and automatically screws. The guy that's cutting your grass, he's on a power mower that's got hydraulic turning. He can do the work of 3 guys with the old push mowers. So what we would expect if they couldn't produce enough to be paid the minimum wage is that as productivity increased, the number of unemployed and unemployable people would steadily decline. Fair enough?
Say this again?
Technology, if the reason that they're unemployed is because they can't produce enough value every hour that they can be paid the minimum wage, what we would expect is that as technology keeps increasing the results of labor, the number of people who are unemployable because they can't produce enough would be on a steady decline, wouldn't it?
You are saying basically, if they become more productive, then
Yeah.
there should be fewer
Yeah.
unemployed people, right?
Right, and whether it's the cash register that gets you through the line faster, or the lawnmower you sit on and you spin around the yard cutting the grass, or the gun that shoots nails, everywhere you turn, the office with computers that keep records and spit out information, it increases the results of everyone's labor. And what we would expect, if that's the reason that people couldn't produce enough effective, great enough result that they could be paid the minimum wage, we'd expect as technology advanced, that the number of people who were unemployable would go just the opposite, would decline. As productivity increased, unemployment would decline. Has unemployment declined? No. The least productive people are always unemployable, and yet productivity is steadily increasing. But there aren't enough jobs. That's the reason. So the question remains, why aren't there enough jobs? Back to our model of production. Can you live without land, that on which we stand and from which we produce everything that preserves our existence and gratifies our desires is made out of land, isn't it? Some natural resource. So, is there any free land in the United States where you can go and employ yourself?
Not at all. This means sometimes to talk about the freelance
Yeah.
is like talking about the sex of the angels.
Yeah.
Because it don't make sense. It's
It's
already
all
something that is
in the past, isn't it?
in the past.
And yet, the United States has 700,000 square miles of arable land. 460 people per square mile.
It's interesting.
France has nearly 860. The United Kingdom has 2,700. America, the United States, is a very sparsely populated country. Now, there was once free land in America. What happened? So, I take you into a hypothetical territory. You know, anytime you have any comments, just stop me, like Rita did, and talk. You know.
Well, since you say that, when you use the word unemployable, how do you mean that?
They can't get a job. Can't, because...
So how do you distinguish that from saying they are unemployed?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Great opportunity here.
Okay.
Thank you. What we would say today is if you don't have a high school diploma or you don't have, I better be careful, we talk about myself, huh? If you don't have those basic skills, that nobody can hire you. You're just branded unemployed because you say, oh, I can't read or write. Well, why, okay, there's nothing no job that I could give you and make a profit on in which no job that I could give you in which you could produce enough because I need you to read and write. You have to be able to follow written orders. You have to be able to tell me what you did. You have to be able to communicate. You can't use it, nowadays that you can't use a computer? What? Oh, well, I wouldn't have you delivering my groceries. I need you to fill out reports. So you would be unemployable, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So I'm just reconciling that with the statement that as technology increases productivity, we'd expect fewer people
To be unemployable.
unemployed.
Both unemployed and unemployable.
Yeah.
But you can see where a few years ago, if you went and worked in a hamburger place, you had to be able to write out the tickets and send them back to the cook. Now you just push the pictures. You don't have to be able to read. You got to know numbers, but you don't have to really read. You take a picture of the Coke and the different sizes, and so the technology is compensating over and over for less and less skill.
Although it is adding certain things at some level, right? Like computer literacy, although there are jobs that don't require that. Probably.
Right.
Right, so you're looking at a very minimal job that requires, all right, anyway, so.
I read recently that 63% of the prisoners are functionally illiterate.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
I didn't know that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, one of the reasons why they are functionally illiterate is that many of them had reading problems as school children, and dropped out of school because they didn't get the proper intervention to teach them how to read. And it wasn't that they were stupid. In fact, they were probably very resourceful, got themselves out of school and into crime because they were resourceful.
Crime takes a lot of skill.
Absolutely, and the determination and all that.
Yeah.
And
Risk-taking.
they wind up in jail. And so, one of the very important interventions in the prison system comes out of people who go and teach reading.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, I used to teach the Henry George class in the prison. And I, having been diagnosed with dyslexia myself and going for therapy for it, I was about, I think, 37. And it was during that time when I was teaching in the prison. And I said, you know, that's what's wrong with these guys. Maybe a lot of them have some kind of learning disability, and that's why they couldn't function and get a decent job. But they aren't stupid, like you say. So they figure, hey, and I'm a risk taker, I'll steal. Well, that's how billionaires get rich, isn't it? They steal legally.
Lumber and company.
Yeah. I have a feeling it would be virtually impossible to become a billionaire if you were an honest, fair broker. You didn't you weren't given an advantage over others. You had to compete and so on. All right, so here we have this hypothetical territory, and the land is really excellent, and this is just as good, but of course there's a swamp there, good, mediocre, poor, and along comes our first settler, Ibrahima, and he just keeps going across better and better. Well, why stop? Finally gets to this swamp, and you can see that on the other side it looks like there's no swamp, and it's a clear shoreline, and he says, if I can just get across that river, man, this is great. He gets across the river, and it's excellent, and he sees the mountains, and he says, well, I think I've come far enough. So he walks back and forth, trying to find one place that's better than any other place. Does that remind you of something in the book? The Unbounded Savannah, right? Isn't that what he's saying? Trying to find one place that's better than any other place. He's beset by the sameness, the richness, blah, 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 and he can't find any place that's better than any other than all the rest, and he stakes himself a couple hundred acres. Now, builds a cabin, plants some crops, starts to live happily ever after, but it has to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. The one thing that's really working against him is the most important person of the evening.
Your soda. So hopefully you guys like Coca-Cola and Sprite.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, he would welcome, as they say, the sorriest stranger. And what do you know? Marcial shows up. And is about to, when he says, Ibrahim, I haven't seen you since we were working together at the Henry George School back in 2014. Wow, what a coincidence that you would be out here. Is that your cabin and all that wheat that's grown? Is that yours? Absolutely. What makes it his?
I'm going next.
Pardon me?
I'm going next.
You're going next. Yes, sir.
Gets over.
So why is it his?
He got there
My
first.
neighbor, and I got there.
He got there first.
Well, if getting somewhere first and claiming it, thank you, yours, Marcial says, hell, I'm 6 months older than him, and I claim the earth and the stars. If getting somewhere first and claiming it made it yours, right? So what am I trying to draw out of you?
Working.
Labor.
Producing. He produced
crop.
he built the house, he planted the crop, etc., etc. So then, Marcial would say to him, okay, but I see you staked off a couple hundred acres of land. Surely you're not claiming to have made this part of the earth. Ooh. Now what's the argument going to be, Sarah? Well, while Ibrahim is trying to think of a good argument, Marcial would say, I'll tell you what, there's only two of us here, and if you'll acknowledge this as my 200 acres, I'll acknowledge that as your 200 acres. I'll never take a shortcut through your living room on my way home for lunch. I'll never step inside your cropland if you'll promise me the same thing. And if Anthony shows up, we'll stick together. Huh? So now we have the first title to land. And the third settler, Anthony, shows up. Do they have any advantage over Anthony? In terms of natural opportunities?
No, because we postulated it's.
The land is just as fertile, just as close to the river, it's all equal. So what did the title to land give them? What is the justification for title to land?
First come, first served.
Pardon me?
First come, first served.
He stepped out of the room for 1 minute, that was a big mistake, right?
Well, that is the justification for private property we talk about. In a nutshell.
So, what does that title give you?
I showed
Now.
it first.
It didn't give you an advantage over anyone else because there's still land down here that's free for somebody else. So what did it give you?
The right to exclusive use of that land.
And keep going.
And do not have anybody else go on it and produce
And take what?
nature.
And your own efforts went
Take
into
what,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Take what you produce on
That's
it.
all.
Nobody can take his cabin or occupy his cabin. Nobody can harvest his wheat, etc., etc. I should have said corn, which would be more logical. So it gives you the right to keep what you produce on the land, but without giving you an advantage over anyone else. Could there be any other justification for title to land? Other than exploitation? Taking what other people
No other
produce?
moral
As
justification.
I guess Rita said that you want to enslave people?
Yeah, there's no other moral justification.
No other moral
But
justification.
you know, I have a hard time disassociating myself from the culture we live in,
From the what?
from the actual society that we live in.
Yeah, the kleptocracy.
Yes, I'm trying to remember that we're talking about George.
Morality, yeah, something you don't hear much. The stuff you hear tell of but hardly ever see.
Yeah.
So the argument would be that nobody is going to plant a crop, much less build a house or a modern factory, if they can't get title to land. So, and I suppose if we went back 10,000 years ago, there was no title to land, I guess depending on where you go in the world. But when agriculture is implemented and the family becomes the individual unit, we got to divide the land up so people can keep what they produce on. And as long as there's land of equal quality for other people, it doesn't offer an advantage. But you can see what happens. Now the land is just as fertile, but how'd you like to drag things through that swamp that you wanted to trade? And now the fertility is less, and it just keeps getting less. And so if we decided to keep score, we say, all right, all the land to the left is owned by somebody, all the land to the right is still free. And about that time, 3 guys show up at the frontier. And Ibrahim, he was just enjoying life, you know, he's working hard and enjoying it more and so on, and lightning hits his cabin and burns it to the ground. He gets out with nothing but the shirt on his back. He's in a deep state of depression. Everything he's worked for the last 5 years is gone. He's got to start over. And he doesn't know if he's got the real self-confidence to do that. And, you know, he's thinking about just giving it up. some guy rides up on a horse and says, "Are you Ibrahim?" "Yes, I am." "Well, I have a letter for you." And he's just inherited his uncle's estate. He's a millionaire. Got to get us back to where we were and so on. So he says, "Whew, why was I thinking of killing myself? I was so stupid. I'm never been better, have I?" So should he just say, "Hey, does anybody want this land? Help yourself. I'm leaving. I'm going back to England or wherever I came from." What's he going to do?
Buy more land.
He could, yeah. But let's say that particular piece of land that he has title to, he could sell it and he doesn't need the money, he's a millionaire. So he could rent it out, right? So you say, well, how much could he charge? And the best way to figure anything out is the marketplace. So we gave these numbers and say that if you add up on the average, everything that was produced here and how many hours it took to produce it, we say that on the average, it would be $9 a day, or it could be a year. So $9 a year. And on the next best land, because of the swamp, it's only $8 a year, 765. So Tom, Dick, and Harry can go to have already gone to the free land, and if they stay there and work the free land, they'll get $6 an hour on average. So, but they're not all average. Tom can only produce half of what the average person could produce. He could produce $3 on the free land or $4.50 on that best quality of land. And Dick is the average worker. He could produce $6 on the average on the free land and $9. So what's the most that Tom could offer to pay him in rent for the use of his land? If he works his free land, he'll get $3 an hour. If he works on the best land, he'll get $4.50. All he can afford to offer him is something less than $1.50 an hour, or else he's worse off than working on the free land, isn't he? And what's the most Dick could offer?
More than 6.
Yes. $3 an hour, right? If he offers to give Ibrahim more than $3 out of the 9 that he produces, he'll have less than 6.
Sure.
So he says,
Doesn't make sense.
I'm going to offer $3 an hour. And in fact, Harry can produce double the average. He can produce $12 an hour. And he can produce $18 an hour here. But what's he going to offer, given that the next highest bid is $3? In fact, let's make it $2.90. Make it plausible, huh? $1.50, right? That's all he offered to pay.
Only get it for the least that he can, if you can get it.
But the most he could offer to pay would be $3, and to make it worth his while, we'll say he offers to pay $2.90. Otherwise, he might as well just stay here and keep the $6, right?
I thought we were talking about Harry.
Well, I'm getting to Harry. I digressed, I'm sorry. So Harry could pay anything up to $6, but in order to beat the highest bid, he'll probably say $3, right? So 18 minus 3 is 15. Now, let's just say that Alan is the very best shoe salesman in all of New York City. That's 5 boroughs. The best. And you're looking for a shoe store. You could go to 55th and 5th Avenue. They're getting close to Central Park. And you say, man, this is where I want to be. The guy says, yeah, well, that's all right, but I want $5,000 a month. This little place the size of this little conference room. Ooh. Goes 50 blocks south. I don't know what the name of the street is, because you run out of the number streets. But, and he says, $3,000 a month. Goes over to Brooklyn. Same exact store for $1,000 a month. Where does Alan want to be?
We had the greatest concentration of people.
Yeah, and where's that?
Well, that would be Fifth Avenue or
Fifth Avenue and
34th Street or Fifth Avenue and
I'm
57th Street.
thinking 55th would be better than 50 blocks south.
Yeah.
So he says it's the most money, but I'm the best salesman there is. So I'm better off paying the extra rent, beating everybody else's offer, and getting 55th and Fifth Avenue than the other little cheaper one. I come along, I'm looking for a place to sell shoes, but I'm not a salesman like you. Where am I going to go? The cheapest place I can find, so I can just take orders, because the competition will ruin me in one day. Who went west when there was free land out there? Was it the college graduates, the skilled craftsmen and so on, or the young adventurers?
Yeah.
Young adventurers, so
The,
out they go.
The Huck Finns.
Yeah.
Well, there were also government policies that allowed for the exploration of the western frontier. It just didn't happen by itself. Because
Yes, yes.
so
I'm not sure about the policies from, let's just take 1681, that's Pennsylvania. And I don't know, what point, how far the frontier was, how far west, probably around Lancaster or someplace, 300 or 400 miles probably, when in 1681, maybe it wasn't even that far, maybe it was Germantown. But certainly by 1800, it was quite a different thing, and they were selling land, and it wasn't until 1864, 66, after the Civil War, that we got what you're referring to, I assume, the Homestead Act.
yeah,
And
well,
Well, because they had to chase the Indians off the land first before they could
Right,
do that.
right.
So they spent a lot of time, from the 1840s
Well,
on to
actually,
past the Civil War, and later on, just getting rid of all of the.
yeah, I think actually the chronology is that they had driven the Indians pretty much out of the Louisiana territories by the end of the Civil War. But then and that's when the Homestead Act was passed, because the Southerners didn't like that idea, giving people free land. But then, as you say, after the Civil War, there was a campaign to exterminate the Indians in the West.
In the West.
So there it goes. And about that time, Marcial, he's there by himself, and he's old and decrepit, and he says, I'd like to hire somebody. So we're going to turn the thing around. Instead of renting the land, we're going to hire somebody with their tools and equipment to come work. He's got 200 acres, but he's old. He can only work. His kids that were helping him, they're gone, So he's working 100 acres, but he got 200 acres. So he says, I want to get Dick to come and work that other 100 acres. And we know that other 100 acres, well, Dick can produce $6 at the free land, and he can produce $9 on Marcial's land. How much of that $9 will he have to pay him in wages and return to his tools and machines and whatever he needs? And will anybody work for someone else unless they're offered more than they can produce working for themselves? No. Basic question.
Something less than 6.
So he's going to have to pay him something more. How's that more than 6? And he'll end up with something less. I'm doing that to make it plausible. But basically,
He's going to pay him.
the law of rent on one side is really the flip side of the law of wages and the return to your tools and equipment. So it's a dichotomy. And whether you talk of it, refer to it as wages and interest with a return to capital, or you refer to it as rent for the land, it's really the same question. It's just two sides of the same coin. So it would be, the rent of land would be 1, 2, 3. difference between what you can produce working for yourself and what you can produce on superior land, we're going to call rent. And hopefully, that's a new idea. All right, now, so that we can move forward with this course that's going to explain why we still have poverty in spite of all the progress, why no matter how much we progress, no matter how much we spend on education and technological research, wages tend to that bare minimum. We need some shortcuts. We need some terms that we can use to do it. They're just labels. And they're all subjective. And when you come back next week, we'll be using the same terms, but in the meantime, don't mention land, water is land to anybody else. So, what is production? All activities that contribute to getting a natural resource to the consumer in the desired form. So, for all intents and purposes, it includes services that are being exchanged within the economy. There's the model again. Labor applied to the natural resources, which we combine and separate, we change in form or in place. First, we produce the capital wealth, the buildings, machines, that give our labor greater efficiency in producing the consumer wealth, which we store, we transport, we trade, and put in the hands of the consumer. So that anything that aids in getting that natural resource to the consumer in the desired form is part of production. And when is production complete? Logically speaking, when the product is in the hands of the ultimate consumer. Now, I've got some things up here, and I want to say what characteristics do they have in common? The house and furniture, the pleasure yacht, the reading books, the wedding dress, the TV, computer, and phone are they all material?
Yeah,
Are they all produced by people?
yeah.
Can they satisfy human desires? Do they have a value in exchange? Now, total subjectivity. What should I call them? I can call them goods or products, which would be technically correct, wouldn't it? But what would we call them for purpose of political economy?
Wealth, or you could call them output.
Output, yeah. Any one of those things, all of those things, and we'll just use for this course wealth. So anything that is material, produced by people, can satisfy human desires and have a value in exchange, we'll call wealth. Now, here's another list. Parking space, the ground under a house, the Grand Canyon, the sun, the moon, polar bears in the Arctic, and trees in a natural forest. Are they all part of the universe?
Yes, of course.
And are any of them people?
Polar bears are people.
They might be. And are any of them products made by people?
No.
So that's so now the question is, what do we call it?
Land.
Land. Of course, we could call it natural resources, the earth, all these things, but subjectively, we're just going to call it land for the purpose of this course. So, in other words, the entire material universe, excluding people and their products, we'll call land. Now, the results of the following people: the truck driver, the shoe salesman, the oil mechanic, carpenter, cook, the factory worker, the Walmart executive, the plantation slave, the extreme end of the spectrum, the chemical engineer, the computer programmer, all human exertion expended in the production of wealth. So, do they expend energy in the production of wealth? All of these people? And so, subjectively, what do we call people who expend their energy in the production of wealth?
Labor.
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 That's all that's left.
Now, here's two columns And there's a difference between the auto mechanic, the carpenter, truck driver, shoe salesman, auto factory worker, Walmart executive, plantation slave, and the doctor, teacher, baseball player, divorce lawyer, nightclub singer, and the massage therapist. There's two columns and there's a difference. All exert mental energy or physical energy, right? And each one's energy results in a valuable product. But what about the second column?
Those are all services.
Each one, energy results in a valuable satisfaction, but they're not, they don't result in wealth. So there, I got one chair right here, sir, and we got a sandwich in a little while. Sure. Now, of course, most of us would say that services is part of political economy. But when they were formulating this as a science, apparently they were only focused on products, not on services. So they said it's the science which treats of the nature of wealth, and the natural laws governing its production and distribution. So they didn't include services, but obviously the same rules apply to services that apply to the production of wealth. So we can see that. So we got labor and service. A different distinction without a difference, isn't that what they say? As long as it's being traded in the economy.
I think you could call them both service.
Well,
Labor is a form of service.
okay. But the only thing is that the results of the service are not material.
There's a difference. There's a
Whereas
distinction, yeah.
what we're calling labor yields a material product.
Some of those are actually services too, like.
Well, that's an interesting thing, and I think that would be a good thing to do in the review.
Yeah.
Because whenever you review, you get a chance to teach the lesson twice, right?
doesn't produce anything.
You know, we normally think of an auto mechanic as a service, not a thing, but is that car worth more when it's repaired than it was when it came into the shop? So you produce wealth, haven't you?
Produce wealth, yes.
And a burger that's cooked and served on a bun, isn't that worth more than just a piece of raw meat and a fresh roll? So you've actually produced wealth, haven't you? But we call it the service industry. And we call it, often we talk about the low-paid service industry. In fact, I would say the people who really are performing a service are among the higher-paid people. Lawyers, right? I don't know about teachers.
I have a question. So you're saying that the service doesn't produce anything that's material, so therefore it wouldn't fit the criteria for the definition of wealth.
Yeah.
So in the United States, we know that we're more of a services-based economy. So would you say that we're not really producing wealth?
Great point. I think that it's a misnomer when you look at the things they're calling the service economy. I think most of those things are producing wealth. They're increasing the value of wealth, and that's it. I mean, when they say this is a service economy, I don't think they're talking about Wall Street and doctors and lawyers and teachers and stuff, massage therapists. They're talking about people who clean houses and flip burgers and things like that. Service economy.
I think it's all of it, really.
Well, it is all of it, but I'm saying that when they're saying that we're no longer they're saying we're no longer a manufacturing economy, we're a service economy. But I think that a lot of the things they're putting in the category of service really, by concept, is producing wealth. Is a clean house worth more than a dirty house? Sure.
It's just that we don't call it, they don't call it manufacturing.
Right, and it's not manufacturing, but it's producing wealth.
Producing wealth.
It might be very temporarily, you clean the house, it gets dirty a week later, but for practical purposes, you wouldn't call them a manufacturer, but as a concept, the house is worth more to clean. They've increased the value of wealth, haven't they?
It's a little tricky though, because
Very tricky.
you're saying that service is not material, but if you're going to stick to your the criteria, if you're going to stick with the criteria for what wealth is, the four criteria, And if one criteria is missing, then definition is not complete.
Right, right. So that's why I was trying to say, the only difference here is between what they define as
missing.
labor is all human.
You're
Let
saying that
me
the
back
service
up.
produces wealth.
All,
And I'm challenging the definition.
all human exertion in the production of wealth we call labor. So if no wealth is produced, and we say that's labor too, haven't we contradicted our definition? And that's why I've gone to the trouble of doing this, so that nobody could say, well, you just contradicted yourself. You said all mental and physical exertion in the production of wealth, they didn't produce any wealth, they gave you a haircut. But, okay, so I've got a separate category, but we're saying really the same rules apply to service that apply to
That's really the tricky point we get into by not including our own creatureness as part of land. We include every other creatureness.
That's right, and it's called an anthropocentric point
Yes,
of view.
it is, indeed.
Right? so that it's hard. And I guess that's one of the things that I should make myself a note on here.
But we kind of are doing that now because we're commodifying people. So in a sense, people are becoming, well, now we're human resources, let's say. We're not personnel anymore. So we are sort of doing that. We're making people more into commodities.
Well, I mean, they're
Maybe
even calling
you're
it
into
human
land.
capital, aren't they? Right. Human capital and then natural capital and,
It's
yeah.
capital.
So you're absolutely right, both
So
of you.
maybe
You're
that's
absolutely
why
right.
that's kind of migrated that way in thinking.
Yeah, I agree completely. And so that's why I've gone to the trouble of doing this. Now, Lindy has gone to great lengths, it seems to me, to redefine the science of political economy. And I don't see anything wrong with that, but I like to keep it as easy as I can. And because he really had to work at it to make service fit into political economy. You couldn't say that political economy is the science that treats of the nature of wealth, because now we're talking about services too. So I just think it's easier to do this, and I'll concentrate on some of the more complicated stuff. And the steel mill, the lumber truck, the brewery vat, the taxi cab, the garbage truck, the toaster on the shelf of a store, trees planted in a nursery, the sewing machine in the factory, 10,000 pints of bottled water, and an auto assembly plant. All right. Are all of these wealth?
Yeah.
In other words, they're all products of human labor capable of satisfying human desire even if it's down the road. So are they all expected to afford an income?
Yes.
Wealth used to produce more wealth, products in the course of exchange, products in the process of being made. And it seems like just since I put this together, I've come to the conclusion that to be right, all you have to say is wealth used to produce more wealth for exchange. Because you probably remember in Progress and Poverty, the lathe in the shop of the hobbyist is not capital. The hammer that you use to repair your own house, no, we're not talking about that. I'm thinking, but that's wealth, and it's used to produce more wealth. Why isn't it capital? Because it's not for the economy, it's not to be exchanged. So I said, I tried to do all these things here, and I said, wait a minute, all I gotta say add is for exchange, and now I'm clear, aren't I?
Yes.
So let me change that in the slide. I'll get rid of those other things. Any other comments, thoughts on this?
You haven't brought up capital yet.
Oh, I was going to say, and what should we call this? Da-da! What should we call this
That's
wealth?
actually what he just brought.
What should we call this wealth?
Capital.
Capital. And so I have just put wealth up there just so that they know that all capital is wealth. And the factors of production,
And we were capital.
man, labor, and capital. Now, one of these, we would say, is the passive factor. It just lays there and, well, it doesn't do anything, does it? Except, I got to thinking about that even since the last time I did this. Sometimes, you know, it does, like the rushing water and the volcanoes and so on. So it's still passive from this anthropocentric point of view. How's that? It's humans that apply their labor, mental and physical, to this opportunity. Then I guess in a way that's keeps coming back to that's what land is, an opportunity in political economy. And the active factors are capital. Now, the primary factors are land and labor, and the capital is the compound factor made out of land and labor. And there it is in the production model. The active and the passive and the compound factor, which is also active. Three factors are mutually exclusive. What on earth does that mean?
Can't be both at the same time.
We can't have human capital, natural capital, and what's the other one? The real capital. I forget what they call that. But anyway, they can't all be the same thing. Yeah. Each definition excludes the others. Now, this I would do in the review, these next slides. There's production, land, labor, capital, produce wealth, and the avenues of distribution are rent, wages, and interest. That's how it all is divided. But one of the things that's always bugged me about rent, what we start with rent, what's the problem here? And you may not want to get into this, even in this review, but at some point you might want to get into it. We had this discussion last week. What is it about? How do we know what rent is? Let me start another way. Is it possible to know what rent is if you don't know what wages and interest are? There's my argument, isn't it? I think I got you convinced, didn't I?
Yeah.
Rent's the surplus. So rent is whatever's left after wages and interest. And yet we always say rent, wages, and interest. And I know it's true. You got to pay the rent in advance before you get access to the land. But it's all calculated on basically the prevailing wages and interest, isn't it? Rent is the surplus. Now, there's monopolists, tax collectors, and other robbers, but we'll wait until later to focus on the effects of these confiscations. The three avenues are considered the natural laws of distribution. And of course, governments can come and institute a minimum wage law or an income tax or something like that. But these laws are what would happen in the absence of that. Now, one of the things that has also occurred to me is that we talk about the natural laws of distribution, and yet there's nothing natural in nature about a title to land, is there? Right? And yet we wouldn't have the law of rent if you didn't have title to land. So, you know what I mean, Anthony? It's a little bit of a conundrum, isn't it?
Well, is it?
And I'm not saying any students are going to challenge you, but we're probably the hardest on ourselves. But
What did you say again?
I'm saying, we start out with saying these are the natural laws of distribution, rent, wages, and interest, and that all these other things like government confiscating taxes and interventions like the minimum wage and all these other things, deductions for Social Security and stuff, these are interventions. We're focused on the natural laws first, and then we can see how these interventions affect things. But there's no natural title to land. That's an intervention right there, isn't it?
Well, but it grows out of a natural tendency to claim territory as your own.
Well,
And it's a formalization
is that
of
a
that.
natural tendency?
Is that a natural
I
tendency?
think it is, because if you look at all societies, even if it's a tribal society where they share, they don't
They,
share with
they
another
don't share with
tribe.
the other tribe, I know what you're saying, absolutely. They claim hunting ground, but there's nothing in nature that assigns, God doesn't come down and assign the Israelites
No, but
a section of
it's-
land, right?
But it's inherent in
To
organisms.
claim land.
Yeah, I mean, a wolf or a gorilla,
Title, yeah,
you
but,
know, they want certain areas. Chimpanzees will fight over areas.
and I guess robbers feel inherently entitled to steal from you, right? Hey, I'm bigger than he is and I'm hungry, I'm taking what he's
But you
got.
see, this is why robbers are criminals, because they go against natural law.
But do they? More
I
so
think
than a guy who comes in and
because-
claims a territory?
Because it goes against our moral feeling that we should own what we work on and we get,
Well, that is virtually true, but then where does this claiming territory come from?
it's potential.
I think there's a little contradiction here, but
It makes sense.
But I guess remember when we started, I think you agree with me, that all that title to land was giving you was a right to keep what you do, and what we all inherently believe is a natural right to keep what we produced in our self-preservation. It wasn't until all the best land was gone that this institution evolved into an advantage given to some over others. So anyway, something that we want to consider. All gains from the exertion of labor, whether we work for someone else or we work for ourselves, whether you're the CEO or the slave who gets food, clothing, and shelter, we're calling the return wages. And interest, all the gains from the ownership of capital, whether you lend it or you use it yourself. And of course, would wear and tear be considered part of interest?
Depreciation.
Depreciation, you're simply giving a new bow and arrow, like I was saying, would simply be returning what you borrowed and not considered part of what we're calling interest.
Interesting right there, we treat that differently than we treat wages, because we consider subsistence to be part of the wage.
That's a good insight,
replacement
yeah.
Like replacement of capital.
Yeah, very good insight. I hadn't thought of that, but I guess that's right, we do. We do consider subsistence part of wages, yeah.
Maybe that's part of the problem, but.
No, well,
Yeah,
but I mean, no matter how much you got paid, we would still consider that part that was necessary to keep you alive and working. We'd still consider that part of wages, but we would never, I don't think we would ever consider wear and tear, because different forms of capital wear out much faster than others, and we wouldn't consider that. You got to return what you borrowed before we start counting anything as interest, right?
yeah.
Just that.
We treat them
The
differently.
two things have a different nature, I guess is what we would say. And all the gains from the ownership of land, whether you rent the land to somebody else or you own it yourself. So all of the gains that you enjoy because you have superior land over that which is free, we call rent. And in political economy, we don't like the word profit. And only because it doesn't indicate its source, whether it's rent, wages, or interest, and we're interested in the distribution of wealth. We're interested in rent, wages, and interest. And since profit only denotes the gain, we try to stay away from that term. Now, Lindy, you may remember when he was here, he had, quite a spiel about it. But I think that's way over the head, And I've argued with him, and he beat me in the argument. But so I think he's probably right. But it's just
What's he saying?
you got to really follow his logic in it to get it. And I just think it's an unimportant thing. Let's not use it. And if you say profit from land, or profit from capital, or profit from labor, well, then you've communicated what we're trying to say. Gain, but to just say profit doesn't help us in the distribution of wealth.
Well, it's an accounting term, right?
It's an accounting term,
Right.
right? Well, it's a business accounting. So if your business
Micro
made a
accounts.
profit, yeah. Now, of course, there's always land and labor before anything can be produced. There are always wages, but there aren't always interest or rent. And here I've got, let's say that the total product was $5. And then we introduce capital. And so there could be wages and interest, and with the total production might be 6. Or whether one person owns the capital and another person does the work, or the same person owns the capital and does the work, there can be wages and interest. Because one is the return. It's the return to the factory, and it doesn't care who owns it. Now, most production uses valuable land and yields wages, interest, and rent. Now, what George observed was that the tendency was for wages and interest to remain constant, and every time productivity increased, the rent increased, while wages and interest remained constant, since the time that he wrote in 1879. And if we were to raise productivity to 16, in his observation, all the increase in productivity would go to rent. And of course, we would say in modern times, other monopoly profits. But wages and the return to buildings, machines, inventories would remain constant. And I think that is pretty close to the reality we see today. Productivity has doubled and doubled again on average since World War II, and yet wages are about where they were in 1976. Now, just so that I've picked up a few loose ends here, I have a title to a BMW, 2 shares of GM stock, a deed to a house, a $100 savings bond, skill, knowledge, intelligence, talent. And I have no category so far to put them into. So, we know all of them are valuable, and we know none of them are land, labor, capital, or wealth. So, what are they? Let's start with category 1.
Claim on wealth.
Ta-da-da! Claim on valuable things. Can't say a claim on wealth because the deed to the house is the deed to the land under it. And the savings bond is not wealth, but it's a claim on valuable things. And what about the skill, knowledge, intelligence, talent? Is that capital? Is it labor?
Is there such a thing as human?
Talent.
You're so close that it's not even funny, is it? How about that? Human attribute. And of course, today I think most people even would say, well, my knowledge that I went to college and accumulated, that's my capital, right? And because I have that capital, I can earn a lot more than Mike Curtis, who doesn't have it. Now, you money guys are gonna like this. What do we call this kind of money? Commodity money, right. So is commodity money wealth?
Yes.
Absolutely.
To the extent.
What are the characteristics of wealth? Materials,
By labor.
produced by labor, satisfies human desire, and has a
Exchange value.
value in exchange. So it's definitely is. But I guess the thing we got to keep in mind is, which one of these is worth more? $5? $1? Which one's worth more? Right now? Maybe when they were well, there was never a time when that was worth more than that, was there? This might have been, in fact, I bought a few of these, and I think I paid $5.50 for it.
That's Canada, right?
Canada. But at that time, this $1, how much was it worth? It was worth what an ounce of silver was worth.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was worth whatever an ounce of
So you
silver
need
was
a term
worth.
of US.
So it was probably worth about $5. And now, silver's about $20 an ounce or something, so they're both worth $20. And this one, of course, is commodity money, but the real value of these is what?
Antique,
Pardon me?
antique value?
Antique value, right. That's what I'm getting at. So it's whatever anybody wants to pay for it as an antique, not as money. And what do we call this? Credit money. And I have, when I was a kid, this one was worth about the same as this one. But now I think this might be worth something as a collector's item. So one is paper money and one is credit money. And there may be a better argument. You guys might have a better argument, but to me, the reason why this is not wealth is because the value is not relative to the cost of reproduction. They each cost 6 cents to make. So that's why we would say they're not wealth. And they're not worth anything as far as wealth goes, or that's, I don't think so. Maybe there's 6 cents worth of wealth there, I don't know. If there is, it would be, they're each worth 6 cents as wealth, but as value things, one's worth 100 times the other.
Well, I can tell you, if I have $500, $100 bills, I can certainly buy something that's.
You could exchange it, so it's clearly worth whatever.
For a lot more than $5 single dollars.
Yeah, yeah. So worth as much as 100 single dollars. So the value is not relative to the cost of reproduction. It might be, if you can think of a better shot in the money, you might think of a better thing to say. Money is a medium of exchange, but it's two other things.
Store of value.
And the one that George says even 130 years ago, and I think it's probably true today, because most people are using checks and debit cards and God knows what, the biggest use of money, well, when I can't even say this anymore because you use a credit card at the gas station, but it used to be you'd go into the gas station and you'd say, give me 5 pounds of rice worth of gas? No. You say, give me $5 worth of gas. Only it's probably 25 now. So it's a measure of value. How's that? I think that with the suggestions, especially that Rita has made, and with that small segments from that introductory, this is what we should use for the first lesson of the first course. And adding and subtracting and rearranging however you do it. But I feel like, and maybe even, as you say, bring in land speculation in that first thing would be good. But maybe there's some stuff I should take out of this. Now remember, this last segment was the review for a week later. But if you have any thoughts, let me have them.
Where did the review start? I'm sorry.
Let me go back. I think I did.
This is lesson 1, right?
Mhm.
Okay, you started the review,
Getting close to it. There. That's where, all that last stuff was the
what was
review.
your last slide before that?
The last slide,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh yeah,
Okay.
the last slide was
Re-emphasize
the
it.
fact, I got through the factors of production. But that was it, and then it stopped. The mutually exclusive factors of production stops, and all that other was like a review. Now I would review the law of rent as well, and then go on to the law of interest, and the cause in the law of interest in lesson 2, after reviewing. So maybe the thing with land speculation is really good, and maybe, who said maybe it's not necessary to do the land speculation until you get there. But it seems like that was like the climax almost of how everything is going great, and then now suddenly wages fall while productivity is increasing. And I feel like that's the thing that our legislators have no clue, because every time there's a recession, all the emphasis goes into increasing productivity and produce our way out of the recession. And yet you think, my God, before the recession hit, productivity was skyrocketing, it was exploding. But you seem to be totally unaware of that. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, that was excellent.